Welcome to our deep dive.
Yeah.
Ever feel like your creative well is a bit dry? Or maybe that creativity is just for, artists.
Yeah, that's a common feeling.
Well, what if the sources we're exploring today suggest the key isn't really forcing it, but maybe connecting to something bigger?
Exactly. We're digging into this fascinating idea that our creativity, it sort of unlocks when we spend intentional time with God.
The ultimate artist, as these sources put it.
That's the frame. And what's really interesting is how they lay this foundation right at the very, very beginning, Genesis 1.1.
In the beginning, God created.
Right. Before we learn anything else about God in these texts, he's introduced as the creator. It's his primary identity revealed first.
Okay, so why start there? What's the significance of God being presented as creator first and foremost?
Well, it fundamentally shapes our understanding of who he is, and maybe more importantly, who we are.
How so?
Because Genesis 1.27 tells us we are made in God's image. So the sources argue that creativity isn't just like a skill some people happen to have. It's presented as a divine characteristic.
Something we inherit, part of that image.
Exactly. It's like it's woven into our spiritual DNA, you could say.
And you definitely see that echoed in the world, right?
Yeah.
The sources talk about God's extravagant creativity.
Oh, absolutely. Think about nature, the sheer variety, the explosion of color, all the intricate forms and patterns. It's not just functional.
It's abundant.
Beautiful. Yeah. And the sources point out that this creative image in us isn't just limited to traditional art, painting or music.
Right.
It shows up when you cook a new recipe, maybe design a spreadsheet or journal your thoughts, or even just figure out a novel solution to a tricky problem.
So it's that divine impulse to make something new, expressing itself in all these different ways.
That's the idea presented here. It's happening through us.
Okay, but that raises a question then. If we're sort of hardwired for it, why does it often feel so difficult, or like something we have to really strive for?
That's a great point. And the sources make this really powerful, almost countercultural argument here. They suggest inspiration doesn't come from, striving harder.
But from stillness.
Precisely. We live in a culture that pushes hustle, right? Always doing more. But these sources, and they mention an example like Lize's personal shift towards early journaling and quiet mornings.
Right, I remember reading that.
Yeah, it illustrates the opposite. She wasn't pushing harder. She was becoming stiller, creating space.
That connects directly to Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know.
It does. The emphasis in the sources is really on listening to God before you even attempt to create.
That's quite a shift, isn't it?
It really is. Moving from this focus on productivity, on output, to seeking revelation first. What is God saying? What is he doing? The creative act then becomes more of a response.
A response to that listening.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we actually practice that listening according to these sources? This is where journaling comes in, right?
Yes, exactly. They define it beautifully, I think, as spiritual listening on paper.
Spiritual listening on paper. I like that.
Yeah, it's not just venting your thoughts or planning your day, though it can include those. It's more about intentionally creating a space to sort of discern God's voice amidst your own thoughts and all the noise from the world.
And does it help you track things over time?
Absolutely. That's a key aspect. It becomes a tangible record. You can literally look back and see your emotional journey, your spiritual growth.
Identify patterns.
Yes, and see prayers answered, maybe promises fulfilled, right there in black and white. It becomes a tool for reflection and for remembrance.
Remembrance. Okay. That leads to another really interesting idea from the sources. Creativity as remembrance itself. Like art serving as a memorial.
Yeah, think about those Old Testament altars, often just simple piles of stones, right? Built as markers to remember where God showed up or did something significant. The sources draw a direct parallel there.
Suggesting our creative acts, a painting, a poem, even just a journal entry, can function in a similar way.
Exactly. They can be these sacred markers, our own personal altars, remembering God's movement in our lives.
Wow, because creativity holds both emotion and memory.
It does, in a unique way. It captures moments of encounter or insight, maybe better than just thinking about them does. And this idea offers real reassurance, I think, especially for people who maybe don't think of themselves as artists in the traditional sense.
Because it's not about talent.
Right. The sources are pretty clear. It's about the intention behind it, not necessarily some innate skill. Your willingness to just engage, that's the creative act.
That's powerful. It lowers the barrier quite a bit.
Yeah.
So for someone listening who feels like, okay, I have zero creative talent, how did these sources suggest they just begin?
The invitation they offer is actually incredibly gentle. It's really simple. Just pause. Yeah. Ask God, what are you doing right now? What are you saying? What am I noticing in my life or in the world?
So no pressure for some perfect masterpiece.
Not at all. Simple acts are key. Journaling just a few sentences. Maybe doodling in a notebook while you pray. Even just sitting in silence and paying attention.
Those are all valid ways to start.
Absolutely. Because the sources frame creativity not as the main goal itself,
Okay.
but as the natural overflow of just being present with God. When you connect with the artist, the creative impulse kind of flows through you.
So wrapping this up then, what's the core takeaway? Sounds like these sources suggest our most authentic creativity really emerges when we let go of all that striving.
Yeah, when we surrender and connect with God, the ultimate source.
The metaphor they use is quite beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
God is the artist, and we are both the canvas he works on and the brush he works through.
It really captures that sense of participation, of collaboration. It suggests creativity isn't just a personal hobby, it's part of our spiritual expression.
A way of remembering God's faithfulness and partnering with him.
Exactly. So the invitation from these sources is really for you, the listener, to try it this week. Maybe pick up that journal again. Or try creating something small. Or even just dedicate a few minutes to sitting quietly in God's presence.
And here's maybe a final thought to ponder, building on all this. If God is the ultimate creator, always making new things, what new thing might he want to create through you today? Something to think about as you go about your week.